Hey everyone, in this video we're going to talk about something that I get asked about a lot, and that is how I go about making my covers. I've broken down the process into 5 steps, but keep in mind these are just general guidelines that I came up with after analyzing the process that I usually go through. It isn't always exactly the same. Sometimes I do some parts before others, sometimes I skip a step. It really depends on the song, how difficult it is, how complex it is. But the objective is for you to get an idea of what the basic workflow is, so then you can adapt it to your own method. Now, before we get started, I want to mention that if this is something that really interests you, I'm currently working on a course where I go into this into much greater detail. It's called Epic Acoustic Covers. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while now. I even started working on it before, but I didn't really like how it was ending up, so I scratched it and I'm starting over again. But my goal is to release it this year. So if you're interested, sign up to my newsletter. The link is in the description so that you can get updated when I release it. And if you're really interested in getting the lessons to this course as early as possible, my patrons in the Achieving the Godhead tier, that's the $10 tier, will be getting these lessons as I finish them before the course is complete. So consider signing up there. You also get access to tutorials, you get discounts on tabs, free tabs in the case of my original music, and other cool stuff. So the first step is pretty crucial, and it's song choice. Now, in an ideal world, we would be able to play any song we wanted to and turn it into a percussive guitar masterpiece. But the truth is that the guitar has its limitations. That's not to say that if you're creative enough, you can take any song and make it work. But some songs, you'll have to take more creative liberties than with others. The fact is that some songs work better on guitar than others. So I recommend, if you haven't done this type of thing before, start with something easy. A simple song, 3 or 4 chords, not too many instruments, not too much going on, simple arrangements. Something that seems achievable. Then once you've done a couple of covers and you get used to the process, then you can start doing more complicated stuff. Maybe if you're a more advanced player, you can try something a little more complex. But even then, my advice is to start with an easy song so you can focus on the other stuff. Because the truth is that with this process, there's a lot of stuff you have to worry about beyond just being able to play it. You know, there's a creative aspect of it. There's the ear training, being able to hear stuff and finding on the guitar, and this whole process. So it's probably better to start with something where you don't have to worry about, your technical ability and focus on the musical part. Now, step number 2 is getting familiar with the song. The goal here is to get to know the song on a deeper level. Hopefully the song you picked is a song you actually like and you already know. So the idea here is to go a bit further than that and really pay attention to all the details. We want to break down the arrangement so we can really understand everything that's going on and then decide what works, what doesn't work, what's important, what isn't important. And those are things that you'll keep in mind while you're working on the arrangement. The first thing I'd recommend you to do is to learn the guitar part if you don't know it already. Just learn the guitar, find a tab or a YouTube video or anything, just so you can get an idea of the chords that are used, the different parts in the song. That by itself is already gonna give you a solid foundation to work off of. From there, you can listen to the song and pay attention to what each instrument is doing. Now, this is something that involves a lot of ear training. It's not so much about the notes, but it's about being able to discern which instrument is which and what they're doing. So if you're gonna do this, very important, put on headphones, and good headphones, because you really want to be able to listen to all the details in the mix. Beyond that, my advice would be to listen to the song many times, and each time to just focus on one instrument. So for example, you listen to it once, then you just pay attention to the drums, then do it again, listen to the vocals and all the harmonies, then listen to the bass, listen to, any synths or effects. Now, while you're doing all this, it's not really necessary to learn all the notes yet. We're going to get to that later. But you should start picking up more or less what's being played. When you're listening to the bass, start, sort of fiddling around, try to find the notes to get an idea of what range it is, what the main notes are. Pay attention to the voice. That's really important. listen to the vocal melody, try to get an idea of what the range is, how high it goes, how low it goes. These are all really important things that you're gonna have to have in mind when you make the arrangement. And even at this stage, you can start noticing things, like maybe at some point the vocal melody goes all the way, up here, and the bass is playing something down here. So that's already a point where you can say, hey, this is something I have to watch out later. What am I going to do there? How am I going to play that? Because in the end, there's a lot of compromise involved in this process, a lot of mental work. So it's good to start thinking about those things early on. All right, now we move to step 3, which is tuning. Now, this might not be an issue depending on the song, really. If you're lucky, it works perfectly fine in standard tuning and you don't have to do anything. But the cool thing about alternate tunings is that they usually let you do stuff that you wouldn't be able to do in standard tuning, especially when the song is in certain keys. For example, all my Tool covers, or most of my Tool covers, I use DADGAD because most of Tool's music is in D. So it makes sense to be in a D tuning. And, that gives me a lot of open strings to use when I'm playing the melodies and the bass, obviously. If the song's in C minor, then I'll use my C minor tuning. In fact, for most of my arrangements, I have those 2 tunings which are kind of my go-to tunings, C minor and DADGAD. I usually try with one of those 2 or a variation of it. Maybe I'll tune it half a step down or half a step up. And if they don't work, then maybe I'll tweak them or I'll try something completely different. Sometimes standard tuning is the best option, especially if the song's in E or E minor, A minor. Drop D also works really well. The important thing here is to try different tunings. If you don't have much experience playing with alternate tunings, my advice would be start with standard, see if it works, try drop D, see if that works. Then as you move along with the arrangement, then maybe you'll notice stuff like, hey, maybe if I tune the first string down, then, the melody's a little easier to reach. Or, I'd really like to be able to play a certain bass note with an open string, so then you tune down the 6th string a bit lower, stuff like that. The other option you can try is if the original song isn't already using an alternate tuning or is down tuned, start with that tuning that the original artist used. I've done that sometimes with A Perfect Circle, with 3 Libras. I tried a lot of different tunings that they weren't working, and then just kind of on a hunch, and when I think back on it, it was kind of an obvious choice. I just tuned to the tuning they use, which is drop C sharp, and it worked perfectly. I mean, tuning could be a whole video, a whole course really of its own. So don't stress about it if you don't have that much experience with tuning. Start with standard, drop D. If you're learning some of my arrangements and you've already used DADGAD or C minor tuning, you can also try those. In the end, the more tunings you try and mess around with, they end up being like tools in your toolbox. So then when you're listening to a song, you can go, oh, this tuning looks like it'll work with this one, or this tuning could probably work with it. And if it doesn't work exactly, then you can tweak it. One other thing to keep in mind with tuning, I mentioned an example of the melody being way up here and the bass down here. An alternate tuning is a way of dealing with that. So pay attention to what the vocal melody is playing, what the highest note is in the song, and see where it is on the fretboard. If it's way up here in the 10th, 12th fret, then maybe think of a tuning that will bring it back down here within, close to where the bass is. Just little things to keep in mind. Now we go to step 4, which is the real meat and potatoes of this whole thing. And that's to actually learn to play the song. The way I usually approach it is to start kind of jamming to the song. Like I said, with the earlier process, I already have kind of an idea of where the notes are. I know the guitar part. Maybe I have some concept on what my approach is going to be. So now is the time to just kind of try that stuff and see if it works or not, Depending on the song, maybe I can just kind of start jamming with it. I like to put on the recording and just play along and try to play as much as I can, Start playing the guitar part and see if maybe I can grab some melody notes while I'm doing that. And I'll take note of like how doable it is, maybe this one part will be like, okay, I can't do it right now, but with a little more practice, I can get that. But then this other part is like really crazy. There's too much going on. So I'm gonna have to leave that for later and break it down. You know, I kind of make these mental notes, focus on the stuff that's more reachable and leave the more complicated stuff for later. And then I just do that. I just repeat the song, play it again, play it again, play it again. Not in a day, you know, I do this in the course of a week or a couple of weeks. And then what happens is that each time I play it, I usually get a bit further. Different things start coming together. You know, maybe I got the verse down and I can play most of it, or maybe I got the chorus. Then once I get past that initial stage of just trying to play the song, seeing what's achievable, what isn't, then I try to focus on the more complex parts, the ones that I've kind of tagged for later. What I usually do in these cases is to write it out. I use Guitar Pro myself. I just write down all the notes, you know, the bass part, the guitar part, or two guitars, wherever there is the voice, and just write it out without worrying about how I'm gonna play it or anything, just to have it kind of on the screen. And then I start playing through it slowly. I start paying attention to fingering. You know, I can usually like try stuff out, like maybe this will be easier if I move this note to this string, and so on. And also I'll notice like, okay, this part is impossible to do, let's take it out of there. Or maybe move it up or down an octave, stuff like that. And then once have everything more or less decided how I'm gonna play it, what, you know, which parts are going, which aren't, then I start playing through that section very, very slowly. And I'll just play through it looking at the screen, following the tab. And I do this over and over again until my fingers start learning it. It usually comes to a point, well, it always does, but it's a little different each time. But there'll come a point where the fingers start finding the notes by themselves. And then when it gets to that point, then I try to play without looking at the screen. Sometimes I have to do it a bar at a time. Like I'll look at a bar, play it without looking, then go to the next bar, play without looking, and then play the two bars together again without looking. I just do this until I can play that whole section from beginning to end slowly without having to look at the notation. And then I do that same process with any other tricky parts that I'm having trouble with. Depending on the song, sometimes it's just one section that's giving me problems. Sometimes it's a lot of them. Sometimes it's almost the whole song. It depends. But the idea is to get to a point where I can play all those sections, even if it's, you know, at like 40 BPM, whatever. As long as my fingers know where to go and I can play it, it's cool. That's where I want to get to. Because the final goal of this step is to know what you're going to play for each part and to be able to play it, even if it's slowly. So when you finish this step, you should already be clear on what it is you're going to play. We still can't play it up to speed. Maybe there's some parts that you still have to practice to be able to do them, but you know what notes there are, what your fingers have to do, what your hands have to do. You have to have all that figured out, or at least let's say 90%. There's always stuff that can change later. And then the final step, the one where it all comes together, is practicing. Now that we know all the notes and we know how we're going to play it, where we're going to play it, now we just start practicing. For me, that means, and this is what I recommend, I put on a metronome really slowly and I start playing through the song from beginning to end. If I run into any problems, into any parts that I can't play, I focus on those first until I can play it at the tempo that I decided. And I'm talking really slow, 50 BPM, 60 BPM. And once you can play the whole song at that really slow tempo, then we start speeding it up. What I usually do at this point, once I get it up to sort of a decent speed, I start using the original recording and playing with it again. I use VLC on my computer, or I also use the YouTube video of whatever the song is, and I put it at half speed, and then I just play along with it. Makes the process a little more entertaining. And it also reminds me of what the original intention of the song is and kind of keeps it in my head while I'm playing the song. And then once I get that down at half speed, then I start bringing up the speed little by little until it's at 100%. And that's basically it. One of the things I like to do after it's all done is to record myself playing it, just to be able to listen to it objectively. that's like one last check to see if there's anything that I still don't like, or, you know, maybe even then I can decide, like, you know what, this part, let's simplify it. And also, once you're able to play it and you're playing it up to speed, now that you start worrying about performing it, even then you might make some choices. Something that tends to happen a lot to me is that I'll figure out stuff finger style, but then end up playing it with a pick because it just goes with the energy of the song better. But that usually means simplifying the arrangement a little bit so I can play with a pick. And yeah, so that's basically it. That's my process. I know it's a very general overview, but hope it was helpful to you. And like I said, if this is something that really interests you and you want to learn more, sign up for my newsletter and I'll let you know when my course is ready. So that's it for today. Hope that was helpful. See you next time. Bye.